This is our last panel, and we are still very excited. Maybe we should have a conference for 1 week. We have the energy, I hope. And I'm going to introduce Sabura M. Naqshband. She studied Arabic studies, political sciences, and socio and cultural anthropology in London, Cairo, and Berlin. In Berlin and throughout Germany, she worked as an anti-discrimination and empowerment trainer, e.g. for GLAD e.V., Association for LGBTQI, refugees, and migrants, and as a translator for, how do you say this word, Worten and Mehr GmbH. She works particularly on topics such as anti-Muslim, racism, Muslim feminism and religion, gender and sexuality. Moreover, she is active worldwide in intersectional feminist alliances in the South Asian diaspora in Europe. As a project consultant at the Migra, she is responsible for the areas of project management, connecting with MSOs and networking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, International Women's Space, for giving all of us the chance to come together here. Ich werde auf Deutsch weitersprechen. Und, ja.
I will speak in German. I'd like to thank the International Women's Space that we have come together to speak about these various important topics. When I read the title of this conference when I came to Germany, I was very excited to see the many voices across generations on this topic, and I'm very happy to be part of this conference and
mit Ihnen diskutieren zu dürfen, mit euch.
To discuss this with the people. Now, in this panel, we will talk about self-organization and feminist work in the context of migration. Yesterday and today, we heard about the struggles of guest workers since the 1970s, as well as the struggles of refugees who are living in West and East Germany. So we heard a lot about the various traces and wounds the patriarchat, capitalism, and racism have left. We also heard how we can show solidarity to one another and also proceed in solidarity. And this is what we're going to focus on in this panel as well. So let me introduce our panelists. Koknam Chorue. Koknam is the board member of the Migra, which is also my organization. Furthermore, we have Seriette, who is stepping in for Bintu Boyang, who is in hospital, unfortunately, and these are also topics that we are dealing with. Therefore, we are very happy to have Saya here with us. We also have Gülsen Atkas, who I met recently as part of a project in Schönebeck. So with these three women, we will discuss the various topics for this panel. And I will also introduce the various speakers before we come to the actual content. I thought I was speaking very slowly, but I was just told to speak a little bit more slow. Koknam was born on the 30th of November 1948 in Kopcheon, South Korea. She completed her vocational training as a nurse before coming to Germany in 1970 as a migrant worker. She worked in various medical and nursing facilities for over 40 years, and she's a founding member of the Korean Women's Group in Germany and chairwoman of the umbrella organization of female migrant organizations. This is an umbrella organization that comprises about 70 migrant organizations and look at issues such as the care deficit in Germany since the 1970s. She also looks at the recruitment of Asian nurses from India, Korea, and the Philippines, and the forced repatriation of Asian nurses back to their countries. Koknam is quite famous because he fought against that kind of repatriation and organized forms of resistance. She fought for an unconditional right to stay for the nurses working in German hospitals. And she will talk a little bit more about that. I'd also like to introduce Sahia Riete. She's been living in Germany for the last 17 years. She's originally from Turkey and sought political asylum. She has been living in Berlin for the last 7 years. Her asylum process took almost 8 years, and she's very familiar with this whole asylum procedure. She's an activist and also a member in the Socialist Association of Europe. She's also active in Berlin and also Germany as part of an organization that she's part of, Kadin Makarewiri. Now, this association is independent, but it also works together with Kurdish women and with the International Women's Space. Sahet, for the last 2 years, has been organizing demonstrations with International Women's Space. So these two organizations have been working together. A focus of work is something that we discussed yesterday. An internationalist women's movement, what does it mean? How can we create a basis so that we can create a real transnational women's movement? How can we come together? What are our commonalities, etc.? So a very warm welcome to you, Sadat, and also thank you very much for stepping in for our colleague Bintu, who couldn't be here with us today. Now let me come to Gülcan Aktas. Gülcan Aktas was born in 1997. She worked as a primary school teacher when she was 20. She came to Germany as a guest worker's daughter. She committed her life to women's movement, and she worked in the first women's shelters here in Berlin and had to do a lot with the experience of racism of migrants. In the early 1990s, she wrote an article, and that article led to establishing quotas for employees with migrant background or history. So she was able to take part in the struggle. She has been very active in various women's movements, such as the Supper Circle, and until 2017, she was the director of Husur, the first intercultural recreational center in Berlin, which is frequented by elderly people from about 30 countries. And she will talk a little bit about that later on. Kakna, maybe we start with you first, and you are going to talk about the immigration of Korean nurses to Germany. Thank you very much for this very kind introduction, and a very welcome to you to this session. Now, since yesterday, we've been speaking a lot about guest workers and their situations and also their resistance. Now, this shortage of labor was not only in the industrial sphere, but also in the healthcare services. basically, in the 1960s, there was a very acute shortage of workers in the German healthcare system. About 30,000 jobs were lacking in the field of care. Now, to mitigate this situation, skilled nurses from India, from Indonesia, and in particular from Korea were recruited. Now, until 1950, and from the end of 1950 to the 1976, about 11,000 Korean nurses came to Germany. At the beginning, these nurses were arranged through were arranged in small groups by church institutions or privately to come to Germany. But as of 1960s, they were then organized in masses and recruited in so-called mass procedures to work here as Korean nurses in Germany. Now, in 1971, the recruitment was officially regulated by a bilateral agreement between Germany and Korea, and the program was called the Program on the Employment of Skilled Korean Nurses in German Hospitals. So as you all know, German laws, everything was regulated with regard to their employment. So one of the regulations was that the nurse degree of Koreans was equal to the German nurse degree. So both states like Germany and Korea, they created these agencies that dealt with the recruitment of the nurses. In Korea, there was an agency that was called labor recruitment for work abroad. So young women who were healthy, who were single, who were not pregnant, and who already had some experiences were chosen for these programs. So they really wanted to have highly skilled women. I came to Germany in 1970. I was selected to come to Germany to a small town called Ratingen. Now, despite a few anecdotes about post-war Germany, I didn't know much about Germany. I knew about the fact that Germans are hardworking, and proof of that was their economic miracle, and that they were very economical and frugal. And they told me that Germans would maybe ignite a matchstick if there were 4 people who have come together. And then this is an attitude that really shaped me when it comes to the image of Germany. Now, after 3 days, I already had to start working. I already had a German language course in Korea for 2 weeks. I was able to say a few things, just very rudimentary, basic things, because I believed that I would get in Germany a language course. However, 3 days upon my arrival, I was already employed at a hospital, and that was quite difficult for me, especially if you don't speak the language, as we discussed yesterday already. I also didn't have any information. I told you about the agreement that was concluded between Germany and Korea, because I only received my employment agreement, which was written in German. I only signed it here in Germany. So when I left for Germany, I did not know in which hospital I would be employed as a nurse. So I did not have any information with regard to my employment agreement. So I was asked to speak more slowly. So I decided to come to Germany, and this was my only decision. because all the rest was regulated by this agreement that I signed. Despite the lack of information and language and cultural difficulties, I managed for the first few years quite bravely to get through the system. Now, the Korean nurses were just a small portion of the so-called guest workers in Germany. In the area of guest workers, as have been mentioned earlier, which went from 1955 to 1973, migrant workers were welcomed as workers, however, not as citizens. That was shown by the rotation principle, where we were only here for 3 years. We also didn't have any language courses. And it was also made very difficult for us to get our families to join us. Our children were not able to come with us. And actually, integration was not wanted. Germany was considered not to be a country of immigration. Now, the year 1975 was proclaimed by the UN as the International Day of Women. The women issue then was put at the heart of politics, and in many parts of the world and also in Germany, diverse women's movement emerged where women talked about women's emancipation, for example, about patriarchal societal structures. Now, the societal events of that time and the zeitgeist had their effect on the movement of Koreans here in Germany. The Korean women then started to organize women's movement here in Germany. That was also difficult for us to do so because we as women lived under a very patriarchal society, and the way we were socialized as a Confucian society, the situation of women was not easy. So we discussed all these topics in these circles that we created. So then the oil crisis came, where we saw like a high rise in unemployment. And now things also changed for the healthcare system. Now the oil crisis was not very crucial for the loss of jobs in the healthcare system. In 1977, we saw that beds in hospitals were eliminated, and health workers also lost their jobs.
Die Situation änderte, sollten die Pflegekräfte.
And this was part of reducing costs of the health care. So many people were asked to leave Germany. And we also had like this anti-foreigner sentiments where Germans were saying that foreigners are taking our jobs and the remaining jobs should go to Germans. So many Korean nurses had to go back to their country because their work and residence permits were not extended. We mobilized against this measure, carrying out a nationwide campaign which gained public attention. So I forgot to show the pictures really. So this picture shows when some of the Koreans arrived in Germany, and this image shows my passport when I arrived to Germany. And let me come to the third image, what you see here. What we carried out as a form of resistance, we started a petition to raise awareness among the German media. And for a short period of time, we gained that kind of focus and attention. Now, this shows how our petition was portrayed in a Korean newspaper. So what we did as part of our educational work, we spoke to passers-by on pedestrian zones and talked to them about our struggles. We also organized various panel discussions, information evening, and informed the people on the right to stay for Korean nurses. We told the people that we came here to Germany because German hospitals needed us. We don't want to be shifted around like a trade commodity. I personally had to overcome a number of difficulties. Until then, I did not have any experience with some political actions. In Korea, I grew up with anti-communism, and before I came to Germany, in a divided Germany, where we had GDR and East Berlin, I was warned not to become politically active. I was quite passive and also intimidated by the Korean government. It was difficult for me to really go and address the passers-by and talk to them about our demands. That made things difficult for me. In addition, we did not have any knowledge about the immigration law in Germany. The different interpretation of the immigration law in the various federal states also did not give us much orientation, really, when it comes to our actions. The immigration law is regulated by every federal state, which means every federal state has its own rules and regulations when it comes to their immigration law. However, we managed to get 11,000 signatures for our demand to stay in Germany. So we then officially sent this handed over this petition to German officials, and we organized a public hearing in Münster. And there were a couple of officials from the Federal Ministry of Interior, the Federal Minister of Labor, and the Ministry of Interior of the federal state of Westphalia. And many organizations supported us and showed solidarity. Private people who supported us were there, and also the media. Now, at this event, we talked about the petition and also the current situation of Korean health workers in Germany. Now, I want to show you a short video clip from Münster. We are basically in that video clip having a discussion with representatives from the local government in Münster. So there, we just talking about the difficulties of Korean nurses if they did not have a work permit, and if they did not have a work permit, they couldn't get a resident permit. But if you didn't have a resident permit, you couldn't get a work permit. So this was a vicious circle, and this is what I'm trying to explain to the people who came to this event, and that was in 1978. So we see here a Korean lady who's talking to a local politician, explaining her situation, that she has to run around, it's being sent from one place to another, not having a work permit, and also requiring for work a resident permit. So she's basically talking about her frustration with regard to that. We were successful with this petition, really, and this struggle. On the 2nd of June 1978, 3 months after that petition, the federal state decided to amend the laws and regulation on the immigration law. There are certain articles that were changed, and that meant for us that we had a permanent resident that could not be cancelled at any time. Now, in Germany, there always has been a need for health workers. Then let me just say a little bit about the healthcare politics or healthcare policy of Germany. Now, the recruitment of skilled foreign nurses meant for the federal German government to lower their costs and not to spend so much, because they getting skilled workers from abroad instead of training the people here in Germany to become nurses. And this is something that is still being done today as well. In the 1970s and 1980s, we had the recruitment stop, so foreign workers could no longer come to Germany. However, they were recruited through other programs. For example, in Yugoslavia, the civil war was waging, but nurses were recruited were brought from Hungary or other parts of Eastern Europe to come to Germany, and they have changed basically the program and called it differently, because these people that they recruited were all skilled nurses who were meant to come to Germany for further education. But when they came to Germany, they actually were employed as fully skilled health workers. Until today, we see that the German government is still recruiting nurses from the Philippines, from Indonesia, and also from Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. These workers are still being recruited through different organizations such as the GIZ and also the labor organization. This is called apparently triple win, where apparently everybody is winning. And GIZ, which is basically the organization through which the German government is conducting its development cooperation, these GIZ is basically part of that recruitment process. Now, for the situation for the nurses that are coming to Germany today, their situation is better than ours back then. They are being trained in their countries and then sent to Germany. So what does triple win mean? It basically means that the country of origin is suffering from a high rate of unemployment. So therefore, these these workers are sent to Germany, and then this effect is that that country will have less unemployed people, and Germany is having skilled workers. But for me, this is not a triple win. It's rather a triple loss, because these workers are coming from economically poor countries. These economically poor countries, are going through the effort of training their people in their countries, but then sending them abroad to Germany, and that is a brain drain. The health situation of these countries of origin is also not very good. It's not that these countries have too many skilled workers. These people are immigrating because they have to, due to the economic situation. And I think, for me, it looks like a continuity of colonialism. The industrialized countries are now trying to maintain their own healthcare system on the back of economically poor countries.
Ich komme zurück.
I would like to talk a little bit more about our petition. As I said, it was a success. And this collective success has brought us even closer together. We were absolutely enthusiastic and we were empowered. And the experience that we had made to be able to take our fate in our hands to really defend our interests, that has really strengthened our self-consciousness. And that was a learning process that was really fruitful. And we wanted to establish it permanently. So what came out of this resistance movement, the Korean women in Germany. And we are going to celebrate our 40th anniversary next year. We have actually performed many activities, and this women group is for us a home in this country when we migrated. And we created it in 1978. As I said, we will be celebrating our 40 years anniversary next year, and we are being in the planning process for the past 3 years. And we want to tell our stories, our migration stories, in the form of theater. And that will be what we want to do for our Jubilee. And we want to do it ourselves. We are lay actors. We want to play it. We want to bring it to perform. And we're going to present it to you in October. And I will advertise it in due time. What about our activities? There are many. Since our founding years, we have been always organizing 80 seminars on various topics, political topics, on our own situation in society, on migration, on language acquisition, on the third generation, on culture, and the preservation of our heritage for the next generation. This is the way we have grown up, matured in Germany. Some came in their 20s and they were single, they have married, they have been bringing children to the world, and it's a way to convey our culture to children and to also safeguard our identity and looking for our identity as well in Germany. I think that the majority of us have experienced that identity is not something that is fixed forever, but is changing. We have worked a lot in the 70s and 80s with the textile workers from Korea. From these emerging countries, there are a lot of multinational companies in Korea, and they're still working just in the same way they're working in Bangladesh today. And we have expressed our solidarity to her. Maybe you know what's happened in the 80s. 87, 86, we had an action against the Adler factory. There was sites of production there. And 86, there were very difficult working conditions, and trade unions were organized, but many of them were laid off. And in Germany, you have actually the headquarters of this society. This is why we've launched a protest action. and we have expressed our solidarity and used as well our coalitions. And this is the way we have reactivated as well our coalition with this kind of new petition from Frankfurt as well, because you're coming from Frankfurt. Microphone, please. We didn't hear because he was not speaking. The microphone. We expressed our solidarity with forced prostitutes as well, with the Koreans in the U.S. Army. And now we have many. Mrs. Han has launched as well, initiated an action with flyers and a book stand, and also a film series. We organize common seminars with Korean and Japanese women groups. Korea was 37 years a colony of Japan, and after Second World War, Korea was freed, and we have a very particular kind of relationship between Korea and Japan. And with Japanese women, we try to work on our common history, to also get rid of all the prejudices that we have against each other. And we have been organizing common seminars, common analysis of history, so that as well we get rid of what remains of the colonial time in Korea and in Japan, so that we can, in Korea, so that we can also deal with this aspect of history. We've been working since 92 with forced prostitutes, so that as well the respective governments could be called upon. Because we've been nurses for the past 25 years, we have organized a big celebration in Germany. We have also had Mrs. Yohn with the Integration Kommissar, and she participated in this event in Kreuzberg. That was in German. And we reminded of what we have been doing during the past 25 years, what have been our successes, what has been our contributions, and we've drawn attention to the fact that all this is not being acknowledged. Yeah, 25 years. That is the seminar with Japanese Women Initiative. It was a seminar when we were conveying our culture, so the Japanese had put on Korean clothes and vice versa. Of course, we had to overcome many things because to me, Japanese has a very particular connotation. But at the end of the 50 seminar, it was possible to do so. That was a poster, 25 years, celebrating our 25 years of presence as nurses in Germany. It's not a picture from 1980, but it's from 1962. That were my schoolmates in Korea before I left Germany. On the very left side, this is me. And the year before last year, we received support from the Korean Association, from the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and from women groups. We organized a common event. There are some pictures as well. This is a documentation that you can read That was 50 years of presence of Korean Nazis in Germany. That was a report by witnesses. What is very important for us, we were the first generation. We had no role models. This is what we had to create a lot ourselves. We have really performed pioneer work. This is really very, very tedious work, but it's something that is really rewarding. This is why it has been very important for us to tell our stories, which is Korean and German migrant stories, to pass it on to next generation, to pass it on to the next generation what you have been doing, and so that our work can be continued. Everything that you have been doing, all our work, all our meetings have been documented so that we have a huge archive. We have, as I said, our own migration story. 14 of our members have been writing their own stories in German, and we wanted to show our stories, to tell it. So 2006, we wrote our own stories. We wrote as well about our petition, what I've told story, and this is a documentation that we have that is coming out of our own home. And you can see it when you go out at the entrance. The books that's been deposited there. The first year, the difficulties, our experiences with racism, with discrimination. These are really deep ones and deeply anchored things that we deeply rooted the experiences that we have been made. As the book came out, the Koreans said, "Why? There's nothing for." We started our work, and a few years after, we wrote it in Korean because it's a Korean migration story, so we don't want to make it available only in German, but also in Korean. So we brought as well out a book in Korean. The documentation of the migration story, it came out in 2014, and we also organize public reading. In Germany, it's not easy to go to Korea, but in November, a few of our women will go there, and we'll have some public reading there. And during these public readings, I've got to know the women from EWS, International Women's Space. What about the interactions with other groups? I talked about this solidarity movement, these coalitions that have been activated when we had organized this petition. But there was no completely established networking. I can remember during the 90s, there were women's groups coming from the Global South, and we organized something called South Stream. There was something called the Frauenanstiftung, that was a women's foundation. There was an internalist department, and this way I heard of names of many women's groups. So actually we remained among ourselves, and I'm so happy that at last now there's an umbrella organizations of migrant women. It came to life under the name of Damigra. Probably you have heard about us. It was founded 2014, I participated in the name of the Korean women, and I was so enthusiastic, and we were so enthusiastic. This vast range of migrant women and of women's organizations, and I had really, I experienced this really strength that women migrants have, and this is the same thing I experience today. During the foundations of this, when the foundation was laid for this umbrella organization of migrant women, and that was 2013, and 2014 it was created. That was really 60 years of history of migrants, of work migrations, and not to act on our own, but to work in a network. And talking about networking, I think with Damigra, something has come to life that is a space that is like, that is been in existing for the past 3 years. And this is a building that is still in construction. There's a lot of work that has been achieved. It is a Germany-wide coalition to defend the interest of migrant women, giving them as well a voice. We have several projects as well that have been initiated, like the Mood project, the project Courage. The statement is that migrant women have a bridge, because many women have gathered so much experience, and the idea is that they pass on this experience to newly arrived refugees. And you have 10 locations in Germany where we organize events. Everything that we have been discussing for the past days are dealt with there. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Öncelikle tüm kadınlar, tüm coğrafyalardan gelen, farklı dilde
Ladies, I will be speaking in my mother tongue. I will be speaking in Turkish. My mother tongue is Kurdish. Given that we are assimilated as such, I can express myself better in Turkish. I would like to welcome you, and I would also like to thank the organizers of this conference. I was asked to speak on this panel spontaneously. I have learned a lot from your stories that you have shared so far. The old generations and the young generations, they all came together. What can I say about myself? I am a migrant. I'm somebody in exile. I am forced to be here whether I want it or not. I live in Berlin. I have problems due to my experience as a migrant worker. For the last 2 days, we've been listening to our stories. That's what makes our identity so diverse, and this is basically the work of the system. We should actually talk about how we can proceed. What are we going to do after today? I have a question for you. What does self-organizing mean to you? The last 2 days we've been speaking about self-organizing. What does it mean to you? What means self-organizing for you or for us all? Who has an answer to this? Does anyone want to answer this question? What means self-organizing to you? Women, colleagues, we carry the same pain, the same worry. We have problems because we are women. Today we are here, women coming from different parts of Germany. We have all come together. The international struggle is basically established through we coming together and talking about the situation in our country. And also the question of how we can strengthen the women's movement. Self-organizing, for me, is to be able to express yourself, to show solidarity, to be able to fight or grapple problems, really. This is a political task. For me, three people who are coming together, discussing their own problems, that in itself is already self-organizing. And also when they share their points of view. Of course, we can talk a lot, and we have to realize that we live into a two-class system. We have the oppressed class and the class that is oppressing the other. As long as we are having these two classes, we as women have to fight for our rights. We have to focus on workers' issues or issues that especially women workers were confronted with, and look back at what happened in the past and what is the situation today. International solidarity is not just solidarity. We are faced with different problems in all parts of the world. We might have different pains, but we should not only come together in solidarity, we should give each other a voice. We live in a male-dominated society, and we need to organize ourselves. Many panelists of this conference have already spoken about the issues that I pointed out. I just want to mention a few things. What is it that we need? How can we meet together? How can we organize ourselves better so that our children have a better future? So that also we as women can show better cohesion. Conferences are good and also intensive. However, we need to organize in order to provide the offers that are needed. We need to be able to touch each other, to feel each other, and for that we need a better organizing. Now, for the last 17 years, I have been organizing myself with other groups inside Berlin and also outside of Berlin. And as has been mentioned earlier, my asylum process lasted for almost 8 years. And of course, I have health issues. And due to that, bureaucracy is moving very, very slowly. Also, I received treatment very, very late, and that caused to the deterioration of my health. One panelist said something, and that was also repeated by another one, by Cognum Iche. If you don't speak the language, or if you don't know the language, you cannot explain yourself. I consider myself to be a political woman. However, I was not able to explain myself, and that had a psychological effect on me, and that affects me also in my daily life. As much as you try your best, time is really affecting me. Whether you come here to Germany as a worker or as a refugee, and we know of women who only get a resident permit through their husband, but the right to stay is a human right and should not have anything to do with the husband. And there are so many women who become vulnerable because their right to stay or their resident permit depends on their husbands. I could say so much more, but we only have limited time. What is the most important thing for us as a socialist women's movement is international organizing. We should organize ourselves beyond our own countries and also organize ourselves as migrants. For the last 2 days, I've been seeing hundreds of women in this room who have come with their own ideas. I was not able to talk to everybody here, but somewhat we were touched by one another. And touching means and being moved means to understand each other's problem. The feelings that come based on the fact that we are women is something that we can all relate to. So what will we do once we leave this room? What is it that we are going to do tomorrow? I learned a lot. And I really, as I said, learned a lot. I spontaneously joined this panel when I was asked to join the panel, and that for me is also a form of solidarity. I have the feeling that I can express myself in this space here, and I've known International Women's Space for 2 years now. For the last 2 years, we are organizing a joint demonstration on the 8th of November, and also the one that took place on the 8th of March, or is going to take place on the 8th of March. No? We decided to carry out this conference without cis men. Of course, there are also revolutionary cis men. And these cis men are also our problem. I consider myself a socialist woman, and I don't want any man to fight for my rights because I can do that very well myself. We can demand for our rights by working together and giving each other opportunities. At this conference, the differences between East and German migrants became evident. Many people who come from the East think that life in Europe is easy, and once we get here, we realize that it is not the case. We see that when it comes to our origin, to our past, that this is something that we have to preserve, and often we then assimilate here and lose all of that. Maybe there are boundaries that are separating us. However, if the topic is women, then I think we can overcome these boundaries. What is it that we can do in future? last year on the 8th of March, on the International Women's Day, we demanded same pay for same work. Is that existing here in Germany, dear friends? We looked at the so-called democratic states, how they dealing with same pay for same work. How are people getting paid in countries like that here in Germany? Are women still playing the second fiddle and being also exploited? Now we are saying that women who are living in Europe that considers itself democratic, I'm saying that we should demand same pay for same work on the 8th of March. We should also demand for better equipment for women's shelters here in Germany. So these are some of the demands that we should formulate, because these are our basic laws that should be granted to us. These are rights that have been taken away from us. Germany, that considered itself democratic, is a country that is quite backward and non-progressive when it comes to gender equality, really. The right to asylum also is quite backward, which is actually also a basic right. We have not just come here like that. There were certain constraints that made us come here. Let me point out to something I consider important. There is racism in Europe, and there are also people migrating from Europe. 2 years ago, you'll probably remember the New Year's Eve event in Cologne. The discourse that followed subsequent to this event was quite racialized. The migrants have been here for many years in Germany and are working here. Of course, there are differences among us people. However, what we cannot do, we cannot just generalize things and also accuse a certain group of population. A certain image is portrayed as if only men who come from other parts of the world are the ones who are perpetrating some kind of domestic violence against women. And I think this type of discourse and projections will continue in Germany and will also expand on other topics. In moments like that, we need to intervene. The women in the lager, for example, we went to the Turmstrasse and visited a Heim. There, one child was raped. And I actually wanted our demonstration procedure to pass across the Turm Street. Now, child abuse is an issue, and when it comes to child abuse, we should act, and this is the reason why we decided to have the demonstration pass through that Turm Street. So what I try to do now is just share some of my deliberations and considerations with you. Rojava, Kobanek, this liberation struggles of women. Women are fighting. This all has something to do with international solidarity. The international women are working together. We have women who are leaving their children behind because they no longer want to have this conservative dictatorships, the kind of violence that they see there. So they are seeking spaces of emancipation and are fighting for such spaces. When you hear of cases of women being burned to death, and I must say that I am an international woman, if a woman has problems on the basis of her being a woman, then that pains me as well. Let me give you now my last example. A woman in Leipzig was attacked during some sports activity and was then subsequently raped and beaten down and then taken to a hospital. This was also covered by the media. You probably heard about that case. This woman was then found, and the police said the following, and I found that quite scary what they said. The police said that we kindly asked the women not to leave their houses at night. And it can't be that the conclusion of the police is to say that women should not engage in sports activities at night. So I gave you like just a spontaneous talk here. Now when we look at Spain, Rojava, Turkey, to be autonomous is absolutely important. And I really hope that we keep in touch and that we keep that exchange. And I also hope that our experience will pave the way to bring our collective experiences together. I express my love to you and also my solidarity.
Vielen Dank, Sehel. Ja. Wir haben auch ein bisschen später angefangen und
We started a little bit later, and I hope that you can still have some kind of strength to go through the next presentation. This is a short presentation, and then we can enter into the discussion.
Ich bin Gülşen.
My name is Gülten Atash, and since 2006, I'm the director of a center for encounter exchange in Schöneberg. Why did I say that? Because this location is very important to us. And you can see my family. I'm the daughter of a so-called guest worker. So it's 2000 we created this space. Huzuz is an Arabic name. I didn't choose this name. In Turkish, it means just old people's residence. Many people come to us, majority of them being German, and other people coming from 30 different regions, countries of the world that are migrants. What is very interesting, in this center, I deal with older people from starting 50, and then some of them become at least twice as old. It's very interesting to have these cross-generation encounters. At the beginning, it was actually aiming at meeting people from the first generation. And statistics know women tend to take more medicine as men. Addiction due to medicine is more of a women's phenomenon, while alcohol addiction is more as a stronger incidence among men. The traditional healing methods die out when you are in a situation of migration or knowledge that is passed on from generation to generation in families. This is why it's very important for women to recollect these old healing methods or to be informed about new healing methods beyond classical Western medicine. So everybody has this kind of healing kit. What is very important is to organize swimming courses for older people. Women from Turkey are also those who participate in our courses because many of them cannot swim. I got to know a woman feminist, and around 40 people who are actually dwellers of our centers or participating in the activities of our centers are taking part in these swimming courses. You know, when you become older in a foreign country, meaning that you still consider Germany as a foreign country, it means that you get up and every morning preparing yourself for your death. People who migrate, they have always this idea of mind that they would go back home at some point, and I'm going to be put to earth in my own country. But in the meantime, you know so many people who have been actually buried in Germany. I find it a very interesting thing. And what does our location provide? Bergstrasse, you have 4 people working in our center, and also transsexual evenings. North Schöneberg has also been impacted by the homosexual movement. There are a lot of clubs welcoming homosexual people. So we have a homosexual literature group and also a sport group and a Spanish language group, Tai Chi group. We have various range of activities. I'm having a quick look. What is also very interesting is that we actually offering activities for older people, and we have no permanent funding. Every other year we have to submit applications, and you see some examples of our activities. We are dealing with German past and history, with the genocide against the Jewish people. We also have also a court nearby where Stauffenberg, the groups of resistance, were was sentenced to death. So this is very important to examine and your surroundings. And if you have more interest, you can have a look at the internet. What shall I say more? Oh yes, I forgot something a very important point. The majority of people who are visiting us are widows, women. I'm a woman who is who has been affected by the women's group. But if a man is coming, it was really like hell. I were asking this man, what does this man has to do with our group? Why is he there? And as women are becoming older than their men, so this is the time where the women really emancipated themselves when they become widows. And if you have the kind of recreation residence center when you can have coffee and enjoy yourself, and for women it's important to have these centers because women have hardly any kind of access to this kind of facilities because it's difficult for women to act in the public area, in the public sphere. And it's a good thing. They are free and they can enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Gülcan. Thank you very much, Kognam, and also thank you very much, the third speaker. And you showed us how diverse and with what strength you have organized yourself across generations. You organized resistance with a lot of strength. You organized spaces which are bringing or brought women together, like this space. People who are living on migration, they have the opportunity to come together to establish a movement that will lead to more equality, more autonomy, and more equal rights. Now, with the diverse topics that you are covering, and also the many women who are coming from different war contexts, labor contexts, we have migration from the global south and also migration from Europe, and migration with so many aspects. It becomes difficult to see where we are standing and where we want to basically proceed and move to. I'm asking you this question because you have a lot of experience in the field of self-organizing and also social spaces. The question I want to ask you is on differences. What kind of differences do you see among what kind of differences have you seen among you guys, and what did you do to overcome them? Who were your allies? And how can we find a common language here in the space where we are right now? As I said earlier, I said that we carried out various works with different women. We worked together with German women, we worked together with trade unions, and right at the beginning we also worked with church institutions because many nurses came to Germany through these so-called church organizations. So we had a lot of contact to churches. Now, what we did is we focused on ourselves. We wanted to learn a lot as a group. So therefore, the focus was at the beginning on ourselves, and then only later did we work with other groups, such as the Japanese women group, and that was for us some form of opening. We also then extended our seminars to German women, because previously we were just having seminars with Korean women, and later, as I said, we had the seminars with Germans. The experience that we had with the Japanese was important, because what we realized was that the German language was very important for us, because we communicated in German with these Japanese women, because the German language as such is neutral for us both. The language, the German language, managed to neutralize our emotions. Despite the deep emotion that we had, we were able to talk about the things with a more cool head, so to speak, because we were using the German language. Now, being member of Da Migras gives us the opportunity to be in touch with other organizations, because Da Migra is the umbrella organizations for more than 70 organizations, and through Da Migra our voices have become louder and more visible.
So what shall I say? Can you hear me? We, as socialist women, we are organizing commissions. We have organized several conferences. We are trying hard to come into contact with white women and refugee women in order to organize conferences together or events. This is the way we participate in the World Women's Conference in Europe, EMO. We have different branches of the socialist women federations in the UK, in France, in Netherlands. These are the countries where we have been organized ourselves as socialist women. And in these countries, we are trying to have connections with white women and non-white women. As I came to Germany, I took part as well in the work of Turkish women and in the work of where do we work together with Courage, with Courage. As during the Iraq War, the Gulf War, at that time, that was around the time of the 8th of March, so we wanted to mobilize again this war. 2 hours long, we talked with Courage whether we could use this international socialist connection. But I'd say that when we look from the outside, when you talk about democratic states, but unfortunately, in that area, when it came to the Gulf War, we had no united front, and we had various slogans during the demonstration. In between the nations, there are always problems. When you want to bring in self-organization, for instance, it doesn't mean that we only have to deal with the problems inherent to a particular country in relation to our own country. We want to join hands and to have a connections in between the various regions, between women coming from various regions. So we work with the Kurdish movement with courage. I'm part of ADK in Berlin. But as I said, we are all women who came here. We have a common area, and that has to do with the problem that we experience as women. This is the connection in between us. And I would like to also close my statement with this appeal for our action on the 25th of November, because it has as core issue, of course, the struggle against violence against women. You can sign our petition 25th of November, 3:00 p.m. Hermannplatz. You can take part of it. You can sign our appeal. You can participate in our demonstration. Of course, this isn't. I want also to connect any people, LGBTQ women, who can come and express your own opinion, voice your own interest. It's all about women's life, about freedom. The question is, how is it possible to bundle all our differences? This is a question addressed as well to you. I would like to thank you for the appeal and for the action that we are going to continue to carry on. What you said yesterday, we cannot stop expressing our suffering, but we should not develop a competition out of it. The struggle against poverty, against oppression, against capitalism, this is what brought us here, and we should not allow ourselves to be divided and not to be used as a token or as a commodity, as it was said before, as in the case of the Korean nurses. I think it's very important to as well deal with our own prejudices and racisms. As a Kurdish woman living in Turkey, I've dealt with certain issues, and you come here and you are confronted with racism on a daily basis. Within us, we need to hold the mirror in front of ourselves, and it's very important to reflect on our own attitude and thinking. You see, when I took up the direction, and when I said I'm a Kurdish woman, the Turkish women went to the direction of the borough and districts and complained about me. In the very house where I work, there are 160 different opinions. And there was a letter that was written by the AFD, this right-wing party, against me. And that was also with the connection of people working in the residence where I'm the director. So it's very important to carry on this struggle, but it's very important to forge alliances. And personally, I'm intensely working with transsexual organizations. For instance, the sex workers in the Borough Street, many of them are coming from Eastern Europe. That means that before my door, in front of my door, I can see the huge kind of terrible situations, the huge amount of terrible situations people have kept in. It's not something that is an exceptional situation. It's something that is permanent. So it's very important to extend our network and to strengthen it, and to keep up to date with current evolution. I'm part of another generation, and the younger generation, they give each other energy, and this is something that I really welcome. I'm so happy to see that. It's very good to watch young people, and it's very important to have our own footprint, to have an imprint on this young generation in that way, to leave some kind of imprint.
Now let's take questions from the floor. And I kindly ask you to speak slowly. Okay, let's take 3 questions.
Thank you very much for the amazing panel. I have a question from Sahar. I hope I'm saying your name correct, yeah? Sahar, yeah, exactly. It was very interesting to hear you and also your experience and the struggle you are part of it. My question is, you said at some part of the speech about the cis-men comrades, like I would say comrades because you were talking about the socialists like cis-men, and you said that you don't ask them for the rights of women. My question is, what's the definition of socialism for you in this sense? Because I guess it's not about asking, but in the world that, we want, that would be hopefully the socialist world, it should be also the gender equality, and it should not be sexism, patriarchy, and all these shits. And I see, in my opinion, it's part of their responsibility to reach that point, to also fight for the rights of women with the stars and to fight for the equality. I want to know, like, what's your opinion about it, and how do you divide these two fights with each other? Thank you.
Ben 2 başlıklı bir soru algılayabildim bana yöneltilen soruda.
I understood 2 aspects with regard to your question. As socialist person can, of course, take up these demands, but we as women should organize ourselves and we can also articulate our demands ourselves. If we don't do that, we will lose the struggle. We saw that in the past. We women have always worked in certain areas of the movement. We are always and have always been the marginalized group. We never had space for our issues within a movement. We don't want to be the secretaries of our movement. We want to discuss in the movement at equal footing with men. Of course, we are socialists and we are fighting for the same values such as equality and freedom, but often we as women have a problem really, just because we are women. And I want to wage that struggle with as a woman, and I actually don't like the idea that men wage that struggle for us. Of course, women, when it comes to the patriarchy, should be able to articulate and fight for their rights in a patriarchy. Socialism is an ideology that, of course, propagates equality. However, socialism as such does not necessarily promise equality. We are hopeful that the emancipatory spaces are going to be expanded. Our objective when it comes to our democratic context, we really think that women should believe and trust their capacity of organizing themselves, because this is the only way that we see at this stage.
I have a question in that the context is all about self-organization of migrant women. We know that the government has started with arresting journalists. We had around 160 application for for extradition. We know that there's a lot of problems that migrants women face, and we have also our share of dictatorships in our home country. So is it possible to develop networks so that we can also combat these kind of structures? There are people who are also in German jail. When I talk about the 190 people, how is it possible to have a look at all these extraditions, because migrant people are also concerned, and it has to do with the issues in relation to this international movement. And the question is, how is it possible to protect ourselves from these threats through improving our networking? I would see this opportunity because I see that many people come from Turkey. They are very present, very active, and maybe that one or the other have ideas about what we could do together. Do you want to answer, Sarah? In the first phase, there were people, the women from Turkey, and I've been living in exile, in exile for the past 17 years, and I cannot go back. For the past 15 years, we had the Erdogan dictatorship, and before it was Andrim, and now we are divided. you cannot even trust your own neighbors. And in addition to this, you have the migration policy led by Turkey. 5,000 applications from Turkey have been submitted to Germany, if I'm not mistaken. People with university degrees, journalists. 2 weeks ago, there were 2 lawyers who have been arrested and detained. In Turkey, there is no real genuine laws, and democracy doesn't also work. That Turkey reached that level has to do with the Sahara geography in Turkey. But you all know about it. This whole range of this huge amount of oppression, these are the fact that people are arrested, murdered, persecuted in their home, on the street. And this, the group that is really targeted are women. Women are mostly affected by them, by all these actions. And if you're detained, you don't know whether you will be detained 3 days or 5 weeks. And when they are released, they just carry on their work. Because in Kurdistan, the women's movement has gathered so much experience during so many years. And now it's a real resistance movement. And then I want to talk about the 15th of July, 2016, this coup attempt. This had divided society. This has also foster enmities within society. You know, the child was also attacked by the military in our own house, and there was no way we could protect the child. And this says a lot about this situation. This is something as well political when we reflect about these multifaceted connection, bilateral relations between Europe and Turkey. This is something that comes from the will to maintain and uphold these kind of relationships. We're talking about a country where the elected mayor has been deprived of his position violently. So we have to really thematize the issue of our rights within our actions. The European Council should know about it. We should document what the situation is all made of, and the European public should know about it. So we should organize demonstrations. We should observe processes. As you know, Erdogan has even led actions against women. For instance, in Ecuador, who have expressed their opposition against him. For instance, he launched an action, a legal action against them in Ecuador. He really acts as a dictator in order to dominate the situation. But the women still carry on with their struggle. They are still active. They made their resistance visible on the streets, despite all odds, against all odds. It is
Of course, it's absolutely important for the struggle to go on. I was in Turkey last year. I was in Turkey this year. Facebook was always safe for me. If I get arrested, this is always a fear that I have when I visit Turkey. I have two citizenships, the Turkish and the German citizenship. And I now decided to self-censor myself and no longer be part of a network that I consider to be important. So I have become very helpless with regard to the situation that we see in Turkey. We have one more question, maybe two questions that we'll take. If it's the last question, then if you allow me to ask my question, so let me formulate my question and I'll try to speak slowly. I want to say something in Kurdish. Unfortunately, I can't speak Kurdish. So I was very sad not to see a Kurdish translator. I felt actually neglected. I too have my story, my language, just like other people who have their country, their identity and their language. I really hope that you take that into consideration. I have one question which I want to pose in connection with resistance. I want to ask the question to the lady that I just pointed to. What you have said really impressed me. You fought a lot and managed to overcome problems. We need to learn how to enforce our wishes. We need to make sure that they are implemented. So I have a question to the Kurdish lady on the panel. When it comes to the Kurdish women who have experienced really horrible things like in Rojava and Bakur, you lived in Turkey. You are an activist. You did not say anything about me. You probably don't have that much information about me. You also probably don't have much information on Kurdish women. You are the only Kurdish person on the panel. And if you are an activist, then it would be also nice for you to learn about my situation and also look beyond your own horizon. I did not hear anything from you about the Kurdish people who are in prisons, who are not getting any support from the West. My friend is being executed in Iran and is currently in prison, and nobody is listening to her voice. It is really important to speak about the whole of Kurdistan so that we are recognized, and also try to speak in Kurdish. A demand to be able to speak in your language, and if you don't speak German, try to speak in Kurdish and then for it to be translated. Gulshan, maybe you quickly answer this question that was posed to you. Now, I have a suggestion for International Women's Space. I don't know how you feel about it or how you define things. The previous speaker spoke about socialism, but I must say that you are right. A single woman has to be here representing the different countries such as Turkey and Kurdistan. But given that Kurdistan is partitioned and separated, and just recently I was at the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and there were 3 women who were politically so different and had different positions. So Kurdistan is divided. I don't know whether I mentioned that I am Kurdish. I've been living for the last 40 years here in Germany, but I prefer speaking in German. I think we got your point. Basically, the idea was when it comes to groups who are coming under the cover of migration and feminism, we need to work very hard to give all these voices space and also have some kind of justice among these groups. Let me take the last question. That what you said and that has been said previously has a lot to do with our responsibility, especially of those people who have been here in this country for long, who have established organizations. What kind of responsibility do we have for the future in order to help people living in exile or who are politically persecuted? How can we support these people? So the support from the diaspora, how can that look like?
Okay, danke. Ich mach's ganz schnell.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Thank you very much for your question. I think it was really bringing the point home. It was very important. And as a symbolic act, I would say that Erdogan embodies neo-fascist authoritarianism, not only in Turkey, but globally speaking, we are living in authoritarian time. In the USA, it's different. In Germany, it's a different situation. In France, too. In the Netherlands, the same. But it's not only Erdogan as a local Turkish problem and Kurdish problem, but what we experience is an issue that has a transnational dimension, and we have to deal with it as feminists. So if you want to lift up our banner and say, we want to have a new feminist anti-fascist movement, and that is something that is very important. We should have given more thoughts to this idea, to reflect on topics and issues that we have to examine in a global context, because it has a much stronger global dimension of the things. Edward is not only a problem with migrant women here, it has been an issue here. Edward makes transnational migration policy, and he is also intervening in German policy. It has an impact on international migrant regulations. Edward is not only a problem with women, people in Turkey are confronted with. It's part of our problem. So that means we have to examine it very closely. We don't want to make Erdogan to a German problem as described by the left wing. the left-wing movement, you have to think more globally. It's all about capitalism. It's organized globally. When we talk about Lampedusa refugees who came here, so we do not only consider international capitalism, but also international financial flows. These are really important topics. You know, when at the beginning of the financial crisis, when the first Lampedusa refugees came from Tunisia, they were what Germany would say, people coming because of on account of poverty. And it has not been thematized within when we examine this issue of refugees. The financial crisis has an impact. There were offshore factories that were closed down after the withdrawal of European companies. I'm going to come to an end because the interpreters are looking in my direction. So what do we think about it? What we've have not managed to talk about is to think about kind of aims, objectives, movements, discourses we have to adopt in order to counter fascist and authoritarian capitalist narrative. We have to organize the resistance, but the interpreters are getting tired. I will give 2 minutes to the panel to express a wish or to simply answer the questions. We're talking about the issue in relation to Turkey and Kurdistan. It's very important to thematize this issue. This is what we can take along with us. We have mentioned it, and we have said a few words about it. We have documented it. This is the beginning. And as a conclusion, I just wanted to walk along along this path to say that it's very important to our common work. We have talked a lot about networking, and I think that networking is not something that is a big kind of flow of channel, and it's not it's not a one-way path. We have a multiplicity of various issues, perspectives, and orientations, and that has to be respected. The way we have worked at the beginning within these Korean groups, what we've managed to achieve, the history that we have been highlighting yesterday and today, this is part of German migrant stories, and the history is always written by people who are in power. And I wish that each organization, each women organization, each can document their own history of migrations, make it visible. And further, I would like to have a migrant archive, a museum for migrant women. That would be my wish, to work in that direction.
I know that we only have a little time. The Kurdish comrade really gave an important input. She criticized the issue very correctly and rightly so. Our resistances are in themselves already a conference topic. As I said, I'm a socialist. Of course, I have some kind of connections to the Kurdish women's movement. We have same spaces. We are also aware of the struggles of the Kurdish people, not only because we are neighbors, only because also that issue is very prominent in that region. The Kurdish women's movement has been organized for quite some time. And I think it would have, I thought that it would not have been appropriate for me to tell their stories because they probably have their own representatives who would have done that. And I wish their representatives would have been invited to this conference to share their struggles. Their freedom is also our freedom, whether it's in Kurdistan or Palestine or other parts of the world. We want a world without exploitation, without borders, where we are able to express ourselves freely and where we have also emancipatory spaces. The colleagues who have organized this conference, I'm very indebted to them. Thank you very much, and I really hope to see you in future conferences. There's one topic that I've been very concerned about. Max Horkheimer, my favorite philosopher, said, whoever speaks about racism has to also speak about racism. We have to look the truth, the reality. What is our understanding of democracy? Do we really have democracy at all? Are there elections? Do we have really free elections? The banking crisis, also these are topics that we need to discuss. All of a sudden, millions of euros are available to rescue these banks, and these are the things that we need to look at. Demonstrations, yet another topic. So we need to deal with these topics. And I really hope that we can abolish all these useless institutions. Okay, I'd like to thank our panelists. We addressed various topics, we talk a lot, but now we need to
Ask
act.
all the interpreters to come because we have this campaign we have started for Doris, who has been faced with 2 deportations, and we want to ask the interpreters to come so that they can read out this call. So please, let's have the interpreters here in front. And we can start with the one that is already here. Yeah.
I will wait for my colleague. So, I try to translate it in 10 seconds in the break. Şimdi bu dayanışma çağrısının Türkçesini okuyacağım Doris Mesa için. İkinci International Women's Space konferansına katıldığımızda Doris Mesa ile tanıştık. Kendisi Almanya'daki iltica sisteminden dolayı çok acı çekiyor ve sorun yaşıyor. Biz bunu ciddi bir şekilde protesto etmek istiyoruz ve Doris ile dayanışmak istiyoruz.
À l'occasion de la 2e conférence de l'IVS, nous avons été émus du témoignage de Doris Mesa, qui a souffert et souffre encore des traitements dégradants de la police des frontières allemandes. Nous protestons vigoureusement contre cet état de fait et nous solidarisons à sa cause.
While attending the second conference at the IWS, we heard of Doris Meda, who was victim of inhumane treatment from the police in Germany. She is an asylum seeker and was humiliated and abused. We intend to protest against this, and we want to express our strong solidarity with her.
سمعنا في إطار هذا مؤتمر الثاني لمنظمة النساء الدولية عن العنف الذي تعرضت له دوريس ميسا عند محاولة ترحيلها مرتين من ألمانيا، ونحن هنا نعترض أشد الاعتراض ونشجب هذه الأعمال ونعلن تضامننا التام مع دوريس.
We would like then to please invite again the interpreters. They have something to say to us.
Okay, do we want to first have the Farsi translation of the last statements?
دوستان ما هیچ گونه آمادگی برای این نداشتیم، برای همین الان به ما گفتن ما رو میبینید به عنوان مترجم در از پتیسیونیه به خاطر حمایت از دوریس مسا که اینجا بود و خطر این بودش که دوریس مسا رو اینجا میبینید، ایشون این خطر تهدیدشون میکرد که دیپورت بشن. ما اینجا هستیم برای اینکه از ایشون حمایت کنیم. این ورقه رو اینجا الان به ما دادن. من فقط میخوام بگم که امضا کنید به حمایت از ایشون تا ایشون دیپورت نشه.
We need the members of the collective to come. The members of the collectives.
Blah.
The members of the collectives who organize the conference.
Ah, all of us?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the interpreters want us, everybody from the International Women's Space to come to the stage. International Women's Space women, can you come to the stage? The interpreters are inviting us. Come. Where are the women? Where is the finance group in the office? Where is Kia, Aziz, Vanessa? Smoking.
Katia, don't go. You're
No.
making us less.
Yanina, can you see if they are there? Leia, Chocofe. Okay, we have to continue.
In order not to lose your time. Okay, so spontaneously I was asked to give the message. Usually, actually, it was Marianne, but I hope I will manage it. So, of course, we as the translators, we have also something to say. In these 2 days, our hearts were burning too. Our mouths are anyways burning, but our hearts were burning. We were with you. And we also want to thank the organizers, the International Women's Space, all those precious helping hands, helping women hands to make this happen. We just wanted to appreciate with a little envelope the very precious work and the very precious networking that you've realized in these 2 days. A big thank you and a big achievement. Thank you. Yes. And of course, this little appreciation includes also our big thanks to the Black Collective that are always looking at us, that are always communicating with us, that cared for us. Big thank you for you too. And we hope the struggle will continue. Venceremos!